Hello humans. Today I wanted to talk about this guy right here. This is a Kershaw that I picked up at a recent trip to Canadian Tire. It is a Chinese-made Kershaw, as you can see. Designed in the USA means absolutely nothing. And we have our godforsaken Proposition 65 warning. Yay. I am in the progress of making a full video on Proposition 65, its history, and just hating on it for probably like half an hour to 45 minutes. But yeah, I will say Kershaw is one of the best designed of like these super inexpensive boxes. I like how it folds out. I think that's cool. Apropos about nothing, but you know. Inside of our Kershaw box, we have... Is it like actively fighting me getting this out? Yes, it is. Okay, cool. There we are. Cardboard box, recycle it, burn it, do what you want to do. Throw it off my table, apparently. Important information. Oh, is this going to roadmap? This is a roadmap. Okay, cool. Tells us a bunch of super boring stuff. And some stuff that might be important. How to use a pocket clip. Actually, correct way to use it. Caution, do not clip the knife to your belt. Carrying a pocket knife loose in your pocket is not recommended. Depends on who you ask there, buddy. Some people really like it. Oiling, coatings, shears. This is just the one they throw in everything. How to hone, limited, lifetime warranty. To the original owner, obviously. Let me guess if it is accidents, lost, or theft. Oh. Warranty is void when products have been modified. I think you are allowed to disassemble it, which I really do like. Yeah, it does seem... It says absolutely nothing about disassembling the blade, which I think is absolutely amazing, because when you are doing your maintenance, you should be taking it apart and cleaning it, right? Like, I do think that that is something that you should be doing. So seeing them say nothing about it being a negative is a good thing. And they actually say what type of screws it is. And, oh man, they used to have T4s on some of theirs. Oh, that is bad. All right. But they do mention, you know, if you disassemble it, if you're coming loose often, you should use thread locker. Blue Loctite is the very common one. That's so cool. Your knife comes with free lifetime sharpening. I actually didn't know that. I'm not going to send my knife to Oregon. Especially since I think Canadian Customs would take this particular one. But, yeah. Okay, whatever. Anything interesting on the back? Oh, there is so much crap. Like, there's a lot of information on here, and not all of it is useful. Like, this is just the general one they throw in everything. And it's that plasticky paper that I can't burn or recycle, which is so annoying. It tells you about the speed save. It tells you how to close. It tells you how to use a couple of different locks, which, you know what? The way that I see Kershaw very often is as an introductory brand, especially with knives like this one here, which I'm going to get into in a minute. They are introducing people into the world of knives. They are getting people interested in knives because they are gas station style knives made well a lot of the time. They have some more serious models. They have some models that are super interesting, stabby, cool looking, and also extremely good. The Erdidium is a great example. They have massive things like the Strata XL, which I have one. I love it. It is a great knife. But those are the knives that are going to get people who aren't necessarily interested in knives, the young men and women who are a little bit crazy, a little bit liking weapons, a little bit off their rockers, interested in knives. So having this type of information, you know, how to use different locking types or how to maintenance your knife properly is a good thing for brands like this to have. So I'm not going to hate on this roadmap. I am going to hate on the materials that it's made, but it is a little bit, you know, weird. It's also it's overkill, but, you know, I like having this stuff available in package for people who aren't going to look it up. Up next, we have our dog poo bag with the knife itself in it. Perfectly cromulent dog poo bag. And then here we have it, the Kershaw capsule. So the reason why I mentioned this specifically is going to appeal to people who are, you know, getting into the knife world or previously have only been interested in gas station knives, is because it is a spaceship-looking manual OTF. Here in Canada, we're not allowed automatic OTFs. We're not really allowed automatic knives at all. We're not allowed to carry them. We're not allowed to buy them. We're not allowed to sell them. We're not allowed to import them. Theoretically, you can make them because the possession of the item isn't illegal, to my understanding of the law in my area and from the officers in my area that I've spoken to. So if you were to make it yourself, it's legal. Again, not legal advice, just my understanding, but that's a whole apropos of nothing. But this is a manual OTF, which I just think is super, super cool. And it has this very, very much like spaceship theme to it with all of those lines. Like if you're into cosplay and you need like a sci-fi knife to paint or something like that, totally go for this. It's super nice being able to paint on those harsh lines, and it's just so cool looking. All right, so this is the Kershaw kapsule. I don't know tons about it. Obviously, I've heard the name a couple times. This is a knife that has been on my radar for a little bit because I just think it's so cool and interesting. The handle is symmetrical, which is actually pretty neat. The blade is not. It is a, I guess, bayonet ground spear point. Is that spear? That's right down the middle, isn't it? Yeah, it's right down the middle. Yeah, so it's a bayonet ground spear point. Seems fairly cromulent. I don't know. It's expensive for what it is, but it is not overall a super expensive knife. ACR 13 MOV, which this was a $100 knife, 100 Canadian dollars, which is pushing what I would like to see. Like this is well beyond what I want to see ACR 13 MOV on. Period. Full stop. I want at this price point, I want to see D2 at least at the barest of minimums. I want to see D2, but I'll live with it. It's pretty cool. One thing I will give Kershaw props for is that they do a really good job of putting information that we want without like blasting it all over the blade. For such a small blade, this is taking up a fair amount of room, but like little tiny Kershaw, little tiny blade steel, ANSO design, place of manufacture, which I don't necessarily think was needed, model number, and then the Kershaw in-house design. Wait, but it's not in-house designed because it's ANSO designs. I don't know what the Kai is for, but it has the Kershaw Kai thingamadoodle as well. Yeah, it's a little tiny OTF. And little tiny is right. Like this is not, I don't do size comparisons, but like I usually don't do size comparisons in my initial unboxing part of the video. I like to save that for after I've carried it for a bit, but this is the wee banter. This is what I consider to be the lower end of a medium-sized knife, which like this is comfortably smaller than that. This is what I would put in as a properly small knife. Aesthetically, I like the combination of colors, having this black, not entirely sure what type of plastic it is, but some kind of plastic, and then I'm assuming that's like a coated aluminum. Maybe it's another plastic. I see the seam. I think these are all plastic. So I think it's a black plastic, a blue plastic, and then another black plastic, probably with a steel frame on the inside. And then this, I'm going to guess, aluminum little button there with a little bit of texturing. I think the combination of, like, this thing looks like something out of a spaceship or a sci-fi movie. Like, if you're into cosplay and you need a little tiny cosplay knife, this is totally up your alley. You've got a little bit of jimping right here, which is a bit of a weird spot to put some jimping because it's awkward to get to. It's awkward to, like, put your thumb anywhere on the blade because of this big bump right here. Realistically, I mean, it's not a hard-use knife anyways. This is for lighter cuts, whatever. But if you're bracing to do something, you're going to be planting your thumb and using this sort of like a thumb ramp, which, I mean, you have some blade play up and down, I guess. It's weird calling it up and down because for me, up and down would be towards the close, but I think I can call this up and down. Side to side is good. Up and down, there's just a little bit there. And then front and back, if I really push it, there's like a little tiny bit, but really not much at all. And like it locks out, which is super, like that's what you want. Locks closed. Yeah, that's locked in there. Pocket clip, looks like a spoon. It's got this X-ish hole in it, 2 clips, kind of whatever. I imagine everything on here is going to be a T6. I can check that. This is a T6. Yeah. That's a T6. That's a T6. So yeah, everything on here is going to be a T6, which makes perfect sense. Look, it's tiny. I'd like to see T8s. I understand why I don't see T8s. I'm still not a huge fan. Let's check out what this initial edge feels like. Let me just grab a piece of paper. And that one piece of paper, more than one piece of paper. I think it's just one. All right. Yeah. That's actually pretty sharp. That's a fairly sharp edge. Like it's not amazing by any means, but that is very, very cromulent feeling. It's feeling well refined. I'm gonna guess it's a slight hollow grind. It's not very tall, like it's exactly halfway the thickness of the blade. And we don't have tons of a distal taper, so it's gonna get more dramatic out near the tip. Perfectly reasonable. You have a very, very usable blade shape for light duty tasks. This is cool. This is a fun movement to make. It's very, very different from a lot of other knives, but just popping it open and closed is actually kind of fun. It's not fidgety, it's not satisfying in the same way that a lot of other things are satisfying, where there's a nice click. You still get a little bit of a click. That's a nice crisp sound. You can play with the button a little bit. Not super, super fidgety. You know, you're just sliding it in and out. It's not going to be like an automatic OTF where it's click, 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 click. But, or even like a regular manual knife where you get like a very, very satisfying click, tink, click, tink. Like that's infinitely more fun. But you know what? I kind of like it. I'm going to play with this guy for a little bit, get like a more formulated opinion on it. I will say I definitely foresee myself, you know, thinking I've got it all the way out like that and then it getting pushed back a little bit on me. That's going to disorient me a bit. So I think I'm going to have to focus a little bit when I'm using this knife. And I might end up, definitely not within the first week, but I can definitely see myself painting this in the future. I think that would be a super, super fun project. Like, look at all those interesting spaces that are just left nice and black for us. Yeah, I foresee this being fun. Lanyard loop is given preference over the pocket clip. I know some people really hate that. I think it does suit the overall aesthetic of this knife. And again, I think that if you're going to go for like some kind of a sci-fi look to it, I would probably just take the pocket clip off so that I can paint the underside of it and like have lots of aesthetic details, and then maybe even attach this to like a necklace and hang it off of this lanyard loop right here and wear it as like a really, really cool necklace. Stonewash looks pretty good. I mean, it's cromulent. Yeah, like I said, I'll be back in about a week with my overall thoughts on it. Initial impressions are fairly positive. Hello humans, and we are back. So I've been playing with this guy for a little bit now, and honestly, I have quite a few thoughts on it. So, first thing first, overall my experience, I think a lot of my initial impressions were fairly correct. This is very much a novelty knife. It is very, very, very small, which means that it's definitely more comfortable in like a support role, or as a secondary knife, or an accessory piece. Aesthetically, I remain kind of in love with it. I think it's super cool. The off-centerness of this pocket clip, however, has been irritating me to no end since I got it. So there is that. Now, overall, I would definitely say that this did not feel like a very good primary knife, despite the fact that I kind of forced myself to use it as one. And as a result, there was some very obvious drawbacks. So the first one, obviously, is blade length. This has a very, very short blade, but that's, you know, kind of obvious. The next one is just the comfort of use. It has, for all intents and purposes, no practical tip. And it's so small, like it's really maybe a 3-finger grip, but it's so blocky for being a 3-finger grip that there's no comfortable way of sort of grabbing it to manipulate and to use it. Which means that any type of hard use, any type of woodworking, any type of force just became a no-brainer, like no-go. Which does make a lot of sense. right? Like, I fully understand why something this size, this shape, this locking mechanism wouldn't work. The other big thing that I found a little bit frustrating is how to adjust the action on this thing. So a few days after I got it, I ended up having some problems where I couldn't easily retract the blade. Like, I could push down, but I was having a really hard time getting that initial backwards movement started, to the point where, like, I would push down, find a hard surface, and jab it in like that, right? Obviously, not ideal. Or push down and then use my other hand, right? Like, totally not ideal. So the only way to adjust the action is to adjust the tension on the body screws, which overall was fine because I did intend to pull this thing apart and take a look at how it actually worked, right? But that was the fact that was the only way to do it was a little bit annoying. I'm not gonna lie. In terms of how it actually operates, you can see that semicircle back there. This operates very similarly to a normal button lock, except instead of the plunger interfacing with the blade, this plunger is interfacing with the cutouts on the second liner there on the far side. So it runs, you can see, if it'll focus for me there, I just want it to focus on the inside there. So as you can see, there's that steel plate right there, which is part of the blade, and then on the far side, there's actually a little disc. And what that little disc does, that little disc springs up into those recesses there, and there's another one at the front. Basically the same way that a button lock operates, except instead of having, if I don't want to focus, as you can see right there at the end, it lifts up into the blade. Instead of lifting up into the blade though, what it's doing on the capsule is it's lifting up into that little recess, which is locking the blade in place. I have no way of knowing how strong the lock would be. In terms of stability up and down, like this way, you can see there's a little bit of play, but what I'm actually doing is I'm actually just straight up moving like the frame rails a little bit. So it's not going to be the most stable knife. It's going to be very, very similar to like any manual OTF really, or even most OTFs that have some blade play to them. It's just sort of the nature of the beast. It is fairly fidget friendly, and if you want to like lubricate it, you can put a little bit of lubrication on that inside track way at the back there, so you don't end up lubing up the entire blade, which is fairly nice. In terms of cutting performance, especially for the blade steel, this underperformed. It's 8CR, 13 MOV, right? And I think that the underperformance was one part heat treat and one part just geometry. The actual apex of the edge stayed not as long as I would normally expect from 8CR. So I did feel like it underperformed a little bit there. But it felt duller significantly faster. Like the apex of the edge, even if it was only ever so slightly worn down, I would feel the need to restrop it significantly more often because of this really crappy geometry, right? Because of the fact that it is essentially just half of the height of the blade. And it's not like, this is not by any stretch of the imagination, you know, a thick blade. I'm pulling out my calipers right now, and we can actually check how thick of a blade this thing is, because it's not going to be, you know, a very thick blade, but it's not very tall, and having only half of that space, yeah, it's 107 thousandths, right? So it is by no stretch of the imagination a thick blade, but you just don't have enough space in order to have good geometry, right? Like, we're talking, what is it, an inch tall, maybe? Back out here with the calipers. Turn them on again, zeroed. Not even. Right? Like, 785 thousandths. 87 thousandths. Like, actually, we can do fractions of an inch. Yeah, so that's basically 50 64ths, right? Which, you know, not like, it's not the shortest knife I own. It's, compared to, you know, like a Swiss Army knife or something like that, it's a fairly tall blade. But the reality of the situation is it's not tall enough for this blade shape. And that really, really meant that I felt like I needed to sharpen this a lot more than I actually did. Not having a point was a little bit frustrating, but not world-ending, I found. Like, I would have liked a point. I would have had a much easier time if I had a point, but it still got into Amazon packages and feed bags and stuff like that without too much difficulty. Any type of prolonged use, this thing is just uncomfortable, but that's kind of obvious. Like, this is very much a light-duty EDC, and it definitely feels like it. But here's the thing. When this first came out, it had no competition, effectively, right? Maybe some customs, maybe some stuff in 4 or 5 times its price range, but it was effectively without competition. Now it has some competition. And that's what's biting this thing in the ass a little bit. It's not unique enough anymore to justify itself just by being unique. And it's not comfortable or nice enough as a knife, in my opinion, to justify itself in any of those ways. Aesthetically, you know, if you like this aesthetic, if you want to wear it for cosplay, if you want to paint it, if you want to do that kind of thing, you know, sci-fi build, totally justifies itself there for the aesthetics. But that's not going to have as wide of a market as just the novelty of a manual OTF does. Right? So it lands in this sort of mid zone for me that it kind of sucks, but it's not enough to justify it in any given way. Anyway, we're going to move on to some size comparisons real quick. Here it is next to our wee banter. My cup of tea out the way there. Here it is next to the wee banter and the Civivi Chevalier. As you can see, it is way, way smaller than either. Which, you know, like I said, this is a small knife. Just for shits and giggles. Here it is next to our Buck 110. I am actually, hold up, yeah. Looks very small next to the Buck 110. And our Zippo. The Zippo is actually probably the closest comparison that we're going to get in terms of size. Blade length is shorter than the Zippo by a little bit, and handle length is longer than the Zippo by a little bit, but really not by too much. In terms of thickness, it's the same thickness as the Zippo, right? Which is not too shocking. The way that it's constructed means that it is a little bit thicker than a side opener of the same size would need to be. Here it is next to the 110 there. The mechanism is fairly fun to play with, and as a backup knife, maybe. But if you're the type of person who carries a backup knife, unless it's a conversation piece, which again, this is interesting. This is fairly interesting. It's not the best deal in terms of this type of interesting, in my opinion, but it is fairly interesting. So maybe as a backup knife, I can't see myself carrying this anymore unless I'm doing a cosplay or something along those lines. But I don't know. Maybe you see a role for it that I don't. And honestly, go down to the comments. Tell me what you think that this thing is good for. Oh yeah, a little bit of jimping on the back. I never used it. This is not very comfortable. If I needed to put some force in something, I would usually hold it like this, because limiting the amount of force I could actually put through this felt like a better call than just increasing the amount of force that I can by changing my hand position to be beneficial. I'd rather choke back like this and have a weaker cut than put the knife at risk for that in that specific way. Yeah, still super fun. I don't regret buying it, but I very much would not recommend it. Stay safe and have fun out there. Peace.